This is the Nostaljunk Podcast, where one person's junk is another person's childhood. I'm Matt McGrath.
And I'm Kyle Smith. Join us as we take a deep dive into your pop culture consciousness.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to our very first episode. An important question you might have is, what is Nostaljunk? Well, it is the discussion of being nostalgic, because nostalgia exists for everyone, and everyone has very unique nostalgic moments. It's those moments that take us back in time when we first encountered those moments. Another major part of the Nostaljunk Podcast is being connected to other Nostaljunk heads on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can follow us at Nostaljunk Pod. So, connect with us and start a discussion. Let us know what your favorite nostalgic moments are to you. Movies, music, etc.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when you first came to me with this idea. The idea to me, Nostaljunk means exactly those moments that you remember the most from growing up. The feelings you got, the smells that you remember, if you were scared, if you laughed, if you cried, exhilarated, right? So it's the special things that are kind of burned into your brain from a very young age, like probably through childhood, through your teenage years, like the most formative years. And what's funny about the title, I remember when you first told me the title, what it kind of reminded me of was, as you look back on those things that you remembered as a kid or as a teen, they might not still hold up. They might not be as strong as maybe you thought they were at the time, but they're still special to you, and you'll still love them forever and cherish those memories forever. And that's Nostaljunk to me. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. I think it's going to be good. We've been friends for a while. We kind of enjoy the same things. We kind of have these spirited conversations anyway, so we might as well put them on tape. All right, so here we go. So the first episode, we're going to talk about movies. Movies. I love movies the most, probably out of any medium. Matt, do you remember the first movie you saw in a movie theater?
1989, Batman.
Oh.
The memory burn that I have is, and I was actually kind of terrified of it for a long time, was Jack Nicholson's new Joker hand emerging through the surface of the chemicals at Axis Chemicals. That was actually pretty scary, and being four and a half when I saw that, yeah, man, that was a big deal to me. But I can put myself back in that theater seat in the dark with Jack Nicholson's Joker hand, my first theater experience.
That Joker hand is strong. But yeah, that's a good one. And it's funny that you said you were about four and a half, because there is like a 4 or 5 year, I think, difference in our age. And so what's funny about that is my movie memory also, it's almost the exact age. I think I was 4, maybe 5, I forget. Actually, no, I think I was definitely 4, because my movie memory is from Steven Spielberg's E.T., the first movie I remember seeing in a theater. And we went with a group of, I think I was in a YMCA group or a daycare group or something. And we went as a big group. We went to our local theater. I was living in Sackville, New Brunswick at the time. And when I look back on it now, I remember the specific scene that I remember is when Elliot first sees E.T., hears something in his backyard. He leaves his house with his flashlight. It's really dark and it's very creepy, and he's creeping back to the shed, and you hear like little mumblings, and and as a kid, what's great about E.T. is that Steven Spielberg puts you in the perspective of the kid at all times. The adults in the movie are like the bad guys you only really see from the waist down. Every shot is kind of from Elliot's perspective, his height. And what's hilarious is I remember when E.T. jumps out of the bushes and Elliot just gets terrified, and E.T.'s even terrified too, because he's the same thing. But I was so scared. I was so scared as a little kid in that theater. I was feeling exactly what Elliot was feeling, and that is a movie memory that is forever burned in my brain when E.T. first jumps out at Elliot in E.T.
I have many memories of watching E.T., all of them sad, because that movie, for a long time, I couldn't get through without bawling by the end of. So that's what Nostaljunk is. Just a couple of friends riffing off of each other's nostalgia. So sit back and relax and listen to our top 5 movies.
I think it was called Neon Magazine. I don't even think that magazine exists anymore, but there was a list. It was 90 movies you need to see before you die or something. Yeah. And that just goes, I don't know what, like it was almost like a checklist. Yeah, I wanted to see every movie. It was a lot of movies I haven't heard of, a lot of movies that I had heard of. I don't know, man. I just love this. So this movie list is kind of weird because there's so many movies, right? Like you can just pull from so many things. Like, are you going for like super childhood nostalgia, or maybe movies that kind of mean the most to you? Because I know my list isn't what I consider the greatest movies ever made, like an AFI type list.
Does the influence of what's good impact your preference? Do you hide something that you liked in your past that meant something to you from a long time ago, but maybe not mean something to you now, but it's a part of your development, maybe an appreciation of something else? You know, maybe you listen to one album and one band at one point in your life that you might be embarrassed to say now that you listen to, but if it wasn't for that band, you might not have gotten into the other bands that you're proud to say define you in that love of that genre.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I mean, there's definitely that.
I think regardless, the list should reflect your genuine top. Does it still mean something to you now?
Well, it's interesting that you put it that way, because my number 2 is my gateway film. Like, in terms of gateway to the movies as I know them now, like, and this is going back 20 years at this point, but like there was movies before when I was little, you know, different kind of family friendly, maybe the kids movies, and, you know, what I thought were just like, you know, the top 40 kind of movies that everybody liked to watch. Then there was this movie, which I will talk about in a sec, but it was a very big movie, but it almost, it gave me it broadened my view of what a movie could do, I guess. And I really started to understand what movies were really about. And going forward, you know, my love of movies changed. So the popular movies, the big hit movies, they do play a part. And what people say are classic movies, they're going to play a part in, you know, shaping your kind of movie landscape, I guess, as it was.
Yep. All right. Well, why don't you start us off?
All right. So my number 5. So speaking of super big hit movies, I'm just huge into horror. I've always been huge into horror. And one of the greatest horror movies of all time is John Carpenter's Halloween. We all know this. This is a movie that everyone just knows. But my number 5, and this goes back, I can just still remember me and my buddy Matt, not this Matt, not you, Matt.
No.
Another Matt, sitting in his basement, and he just had a huge VHS collection, you know, in the dark, and maybe, you know, we were a little too young to be watching it, but John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13, to me, I don't know, there's just a dirtiness to it, there's a grittiness to it, I love the grindhouse kind of film experience, and it's just, to me, Assault on Precinct 13 is a tight, super effective siege movie, even like with a little hint of Night of the Living Dead in there. You know, like if you don't know what the movie's about, there is a policeman, his first day on the job in a new city. He gets assigned to a precinct that is kind of going under. It's kind of like a grunt type, like it's, you know, it's not a job that anybody, he wants to be on the streets, like, you know, fighting crime. But this police station is going to be closing down. He gets assigned to it. At the same time, there's a death row inmate named Napoleon Wilson who gets bussed in. There's a street gang called Street Thunder that is waging a war on the cops. And they all find themselves together on this one fateful night. And the assault ensues. And it's just a super tight 90 minutes, just ultra violence, bad guys and good guys teaming up to fight an even, you know, bigger kind of bad. And I don't know. To me, just the grindhouse aesthetic means a lot to me. that movie always meant a lot to me. And it's still entertaining to this day. I think you can find it on Shudder, at least last time I checked. But so yeah, my number 5, Assault on Precinct 13.
I think what you mean to say is, I think you can find it in your movie library if you're a true movie fan.
Actually, you know what? I got rid of a lot of my movie. Like once streaming took over, you know what I mean? I still have I have a huge box in my closet of VHS. I don't think Assault's in there, but yeah, I mean, they're just sitting in my closet because they're VHS. And all right, number 5 for you.
Number 5, Ghostbusters.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm actually kind of sad that it's number 5 and not closer to the top, because if you asked 5-year-old me,
it would be the greatest movie ever
hands
made.
Hands down. But Ghostbusters is fantastic. We all know that in this age group. Ghostbusters is great. You could be that's a real gateway movie into all genres of movie. There's comedy, there's romance, there's horror, there's sci-fi, everything. That movie covers everything. And the cast.
It's pretty great.
The Movies That Made Us series on Netflix did a fantastic making of. And I think these are more accurate of a making of as opposed to just some footage behind the scenes. But the business side of making movies.
Okay.
It started with a script that involved John Belushi, Eddie Murphy, and Dan Aykroyd. They were going to be the 3 Ghostbusters.
Wow. Didn't know that.
But John passed away, and evidently it was when Dan was actually writing a line for him, and he had passed away, and he got the news. During that time period, there was enough of a lull that was right during the rise of Eddie Murphy, so he kind of
didn't need to be second fiddle to anybody.
Definitely not. We all know the comedic genius of Eddie Murphy during the 80s, but in any case, you got the soundtrack, you've got the gadgets. To quote Bill Murray from the movie,
"The franchise rights alone will make us rich beyond our wildest dreams."
That's amazing.
And it's so meta because that ended up being such a thing for them.
You talked about like a perfect cast. What about like just the chemistry like of the main group of ghosts? I think Bill Murray can probably have good chemistry with anybody. Like it seems like just the way he is with anybody on screen is just so much fun to watch. And even the supporting cast of Ghostbusters, like Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver, just have so many memorable moments. Like especially to me, Rick Moranis is just so funny in that movie.
But that was supposed to be John Candy.
Really? I didn't know that.
He didn't like the character.
Wow.
So both of them from Second City TV, they both had their own version of playing Louis Tully. And Rick already had it in the bag. Apparently when he came in, the version that he had in his mind to play was exactly how we saw Louis Tully. So it's weird to hear what it could have been, but it's hard to say that it would have been different.
It's true. I mean, that goes with so many things. Like, obviously, I mean, that just makes me think of what would Metallica have sounded like with Cliff Burton if he was still alive. You'll never know.
Well, they wouldn't have fucking wrote Load or Reload.
They might have, Matt. They might have.
No,
they probably didn't. They probably wouldn't have.
They would have went.
But sometimes, like, it's just best not to think about those things. We have Rick Moranis and Ghostbusters. We don't need to think about what it would have been like if John Candy was.
Sure.
All right. Moving on to number 4, and just looking at my list, I'm just realizing that this is just another continuation of my kind of obvious. I notice a trend of weird kind of grindhousey, dirty, gritty, seedy movies, I guess you could call it. And now I'm thinking of when I was working at Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster Video, Matt? You remember that thing?
Well, maybe this is something we can revisit at a later date, but the dynamic of going to rent a movie was so much fun as a kid.
Oh, I miss it. So one of my favorite things about working at Blockbuster Video was we had free rentals as employees. It was the greatest thing. I think by the end of my time there, I had amassed like almost, I think 300 rentals, just free movie. Every shift I would come home with like 2 movies. And this was one of those movies where, you're browsing, you don't know what you're looking for, but you have an idea of maybe what you might be interested in. And then I see this box and it has Harvey Keitel pointing a gun at the camera. And there's a quote by Roger Ebert that says, one of the greatest acting performance on screen, or something like, I forget exactly how it was worded. So I picked it up and I watched Abel Ferrara's Bad Lieutenant, and that movie is insane. Like, if you haven't seen Bad Lieutenant and you want to see a huge kind of megastar just not even, it's like he just didn't care. It's almost like I don't know, like he broke that wall of not even, he doesn't even realize he's an actor or something. Like, it's just a force of nature type movie where you're thrust into the story. There's kind of a plot. There's a loose gambling plot where he's getting in way too deep with some people and he makes bad bets that keep going bad. But the movie is just, we're placed in the center of New York City, and there's this cop that has obviously been running rampant for, who knows, 20 years? Who knows? He knows all the ins and outs of, how to just be pretty much the most corrupt cop one of the most corrupt cops you've ever seen on screen. The movie is wild. It's dirty. It's gritty. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of sex, a lot of violence. But oddly enough, it does end on somewhat of kind of a moral redemption. He kind of makes amends. This isn't like spoilery at all, but it's just a great ending. One of the greatest performances you'll ever see from Harvey Keitel. And it's just bonkers, man, that movie. Bad Lieutenant. Yeah.
I've honestly never heard of that one.
What?
Yeah.
All right. Well, chalk it up and put it on the list.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll have to do between us. If there's something that either one of us should see, we'll make sure that we sit down and do a watch along with each other. Also, if you have any suggestions for us, definitely hit us up on all of our social mediums at Nostaljunk Pod. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And that's it for that plug. Anyway.
Good job on the plug.
Thank you. Number 4, proud to say, was The Goonies.
Oh, wow. Okay, good. Yeah.
So when I was, I don't know, as early as I can remember, being born in 85, when you would tape a movie off of TV, the first and only version that exists in my memory of Goonies was taped from ASN. That was Channel 7.
Yep. Back
in the day, which it had the logo in the bottom corner. And to this day, I cannot forget the feeling of excitement and the adventure. So, like,
I get you. Yeah.
Like
pure,
it had
pure adventure.
Yeah. There's been so many lead children roles as of late that definitely borrow from films like The Goonies. For instance, Stranger Things. Like, you cannot have Stranger Things without The Goonies.
Nope.
They're after the same thing. Like, they're connecting to an audience that at one point we were all a child. So either you're a child watching it or you are an adult thinking like a child watching it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're fulfilling those moments in your experience when you're watching it. And when done right, your heartbeat races, you get excited, you get sad, like you get all of the same emotions, and you end up walking away feeling pretty good, even when it's been really intense, because you kind of have that moment of release. It's that escapism as an adult that you need every once in a while.
Man, it's crazy you put it that way. I've never even thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. The Goonies lets you be a kid again when you watch it. That's the feeling you get.
I'm going to be 35 in May, and I am chunk now. Physically. If you want me to do the truffle shuffle, I'll show you how.
You're on it.
Yeah. Teach you how to Dougie.
That's the new truffle shuffle?
Oh, that's definitely not new, but that shows that I'm 35 and I don't know what's cool. Is flossing still cool? Because I can't get my the front arm past my gut when I do it.
I honestly, I don't even know. I can't do it. I don't know how to floss. People have tried. I've tried to do it in front of people. It just doesn't. I can't do it.
Very in-depth. Anyway, hit us up.
All right. So looking at my list now, I'm realizing we might have went in different directions, but that's okay. You're going from more of maybe a little childhood standpoint. I'm going from like my teenage. I'm a teen. Like you're 35. I'm pushing 40, which is crazy. So yeah, I'm in that. I'm the movies that kind of shaped me from age, let's say age 13 to 16. I think that's where my list lies. You know what I mean? But that's cool. You know, that's still 20 something years ago. So yeah, my number 3. So now we're getting into the big guns. Now we're getting into the ones that everybody knows.
All right, load up.
You ready for this one? So my favorite movie genre is horror. It's always been horror. I can remember, I think when I was 3, watching Michael Jackson's Thriller in a shopping mall and being so scared, you know, just a little scared little kid. But I think that's like what started me off on the path to horror. And so in my Blockbuster days, once again, just watching everything I could, watching as much horror as I could, came across this box. And again, the quote, it's like the pictures and the quotes on the front of the covers is what grabs you as a horror fan. And there's a quote by Rex Reed saying, "The most terrifying movie experience or something you'll ever have." And I watched it, and this is, to me, the alpha, the omega of horror films. There will never be another like it. It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, everybody knows the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that movie is like a descent into hell. Like, it's madness. It's pure madness on camera. It's a nightmare, like, created, like the documentary kind of aesthetic that makes you feel like you're just kind of like you're watching, you know, a documentary, I guess. Like some of the shots, especially like at the start, they're kind of from far away in the grass. You're like watching people in the distance. There's kind of something very odd about it. It's, you know, it's not very stylish. And notoriously, there's not a lot of blood, you know, but it's, I think, just the vision of the worst possible scenario that any group of kids could find themselves in is in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You have one of the most iconic movie villains of all time, a mentally challenged man that wears human skin on his face and carves people up with a chainsaw so he can cook them and eat them. I mean, to me, it's the greatest horror movie ever made. It will always be my favorite horror movie.
I think that's a great entry. That's a movie on a very small budget with very little gore, given the title and the legacy and the impact that it left on people. It didn't need much.
Mm-mm.
That's very, very cool. That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, if we do a horror movie list podcast in the future, I mean, spoiler alert, that's going to be my number 1.
Yeah.
But today it's number 3.
All right, fine. Number 3 for me. So there was a period where I probably watched movies that I shouldn't have.
As we all have.
Right. So my number 3 is The Shining. And I think I was in grade 1, and I do remember there were 2 movies that I watched during that time period, and I went to school immediately after that weekend to tell the whole class about whatever movie I saw. So there were 2 movies, so it was The Shining and Psycho, the original, not the Vince Vaughn remake.
The shot-by-shot remake that somehow managed to be just completely terrible.
Which included Rob Zombie playing at the car lot.
What?
Yeah.
I missed that.
Living Dead Girls playing at the car lot.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Man, I missed that.
But yet, to speak like you're 1960 with Rob Zombie playing in the background is totally fine. Thanks, Gus Van Sant. But anyway, so yeah, The Shining. I'm in my grandparents' basement in the valley. I'm watching it with my dad, and I think that this is the coolest movie I've ever seen because I can't breathe. I've held my breath pretty well the entirety of the film. And a face that has been burned in my memory still to this day, and almost 35, I still channel every once in a while when like a sense of dread comes over me, is Danny's shocked face that gets cut into to moments when he's shining, like the blood coming out of the elevators where his mouth is just wide open.
Amazing.
That is truly a jump scare without any cue.
Wow, you're right.
Because it's so shocking to see a child in terror and fear, almost in that paralysis of fear that you experience and want to experience as a fan of, that kind of dread when you're watching something. So, being, probably pretty close to Danny's age in the film, I was just totally smitten with this style of film. And, that was definitely my entry into horror, in terms of like I want to be scared. Like Ghostbusters had the effects. They had, the hellhounds or terror dogs, I guess they called them. Like Zool was pretty cool looking. That wasn't as scary as looking at Danny reacting to something that he's seeing that he shouldn't be seeing, which is almost where I am on the couch watching this movie. I shouldn't be seeing this movie, and I have the same look on my face. And still to this day, like, I remember that ending, seeing Jack in a picture from the past on the wall of the hotel, suggesting that he was a ghost all along, or
yeah, it's open to interpretation. But.
Well, we all know that there's enough interpretations of The Shining to go around.
Room 237.
How dare we just assume that maybe it's just the ghost of our past is what tries to kill us, right? But in any case, The Shining.
Nice. I know what you just made me realize about the Danny and the shock terror face and the jump cuts to the different visions. It's almost like the movie is he can't control what he's seeing in that moment. That's why he's so terrified. It's like an assault on his senses because of The Shining. But the movie's doing that to us as well. Yes. That's kind of what makes him. It's kind of interesting how that makes it terrifying to watch, because we have no control over what we're seeing. We're forced to watch the elevator with the blood and the dead twins in the hallway. Like, that's an interesting way to look at it. I never thought of it that way.
I don't think Kubrick was a horror director. I just think that Kubrick knew that no matter what content he was feeding you, there's a relationship between the content of what he's telling you in a story and what you were experiencing as a viewer.
Mm-hmm. And talk about a director's style being like there. I cannot think of a horror movie where a director's personal style was more suited to the material than Kubrick's framing, the way he shoots things, and The Shining. The look of The Shining is so signature to the movie, but that's Kubrick. Like the long hallways, the big rooms, just the square kind of setups he always does. It just makes the movie more claustrophobic and all the more effective.
Wow. Claustrophobic for sure. Anyway, there you go.
The movie's about claustrophobia.
Literally.
All right. My number 2. I mentioned this before, that my number 2 is going to be the movie that got me into movies. And, when I think I might have even been, I think this movie came out in 94. So I was 14, maybe I was 15. And my dad let me watch this movie. Maybe he shouldn't have, but he did. And that's the movie that made me look at movies differently. And I think a lot of people's probably looked at movies differently after this. It's Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. I mean, we all know Pulp Fiction. It's one of the greatest movies ever made.
So good.
But it means a lot to me just because, up until that point, I was, maybe just a kind of casual movie viewer and just watching, never really thinking about movies as I watched, never really putting too much more thought into the immediate kind of gratification, I guess, you'd get from a movie. But man, Pulp Fiction, the way it moves through timelines, the characters, the stories, the moments, like so many iconic movie moments, were like even just something as simple as the dance off at Jack Rabbit Slim's.
100%.
But then you got when Uma Thurman gets in trouble with the heroin and they got to go to Lance's house to, with the adrenaline shot to the heart with the needle, like just amazing movie. So many great moments, an amazing movie. I could watch it. I watch it every year, but I could just probably watch it every month. But yeah, the movie that got me into movies. Pulp Fiction.
The dance-off. Funny that you bring that up. So today I'm in the mall and I'm walking by a very trendy, high-ticket ladies' fashion because they don't sell any men's there, so I'm being specific. T-shirt in the window is just a photo of the dance-off.
Just a still from them, like the twist and the little whatever the little shuffle thing that Uma Thurman's doing.
That's it.
But instantly recognizable, super iconic.
Right.
You know,
it upsets me because it's on par with when band shirts became very trendy among people that don't actually listen to those bands.
Justin Bieber wearing a Metallica shirt.
Right. 100%. So Pulp Fiction soundtrack was something that I listened to a lot when my dad was a part of those record clubs.
Mm-hmm. Columbia House?
BMG.
Oh, BMG.
Yeah. And
I signed up for that so many times.
Oh my God. Because they always had you at like,
they always wanted you back with 12 CDs for 1 cent. It's like, well, I might as well. Can you think of any movie that has better music matched to what's happening on screen than Pulp Fiction?
No. And Tarantino continues that trend.
Continues it, yeah.
In every movie. The last one I can think of in recent memory that still is phenomenal is all the Kill Bill, like the Kill Bill 1 and 2.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, or the
yeah.
That's Bernard Herrmann, who composed that whistling song, who was a composer of the Psycho themes, and Taxi Driver.
That's funny you say that. I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for playing. My number 2, it's another Kubrick. It's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, that's one of the, I mean that's, you know, in terms of canon, that's like top 10 of all time.
Hell yeah. But that didn't influence my pick, and I want to be specific about that. The commentary on the dependence on technology and the lack of humanity that exists within the human characters, and it thinking that it's going to be 2001 from 1968. The movie is filmed in such a way that, frame by frame, like you really believe that a lot of this is in space, but he has not gimmicked it just enough for you to feel like it's unrealistic. What a dichotomy of what's going on screen and the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Humanity seems quite lifeless as they exist in some sort of futuristic realm. And that speaks to the narrative. Hal becomes the most humanistic organism in the film. The AI technology that starts to figure out that there's something else at play with the mission. Then the last 20 minutes of that film is just
just a mind fuck.
Well, that last 20 minutes, yes, is an art show, but outside of that, how else would you have filmed that?
Yeah.
How else do you try to depict being transported to another realm, another universe by beings that he decidedly did not show to us, which is also genius. I think that last sequence of Bowman seeing himself age, die, then be reborn as the Star Child at the end watching Earth.
Yeah.
It's beautiful because it has such a commentary from so long ago about something that's current day.
The last 20 minutes, like, who would ever have thought of something like that? You know, you need a great filmmaker to really push the boundaries, and you need to change the art form. Eventually movies have to evolve. And it's funny that the movie's kind of about evolution and the next stages of evolution. And it's really about a filmmaker evolving the art form past what it normally. He took a chance, and you know, it's one of the greatest films ever made.
What I think is really important, especially about the imagery of the monolith, just the black box. It is supposed to teach the monkeys something in the beginning, and they learn from it.
I thought what I've read, my interpretation is that once they see it, they realize that there's things beyond them. So it allows them to think outside the box, I guess. And kind of, you know, they look at the bones and it's like, oh, well, maybe what if the bones used this way? And Let's smash this skull. Wait, these motherfuckers trying to take our water. What if I use this bone to crack their skull?
So,
And that's human evolution, violence.
right. These motherfucker right here. Pretty sure that's what Kubrick said.
What's my motivation? Your motivation is these motherfuckers right here trying to drink my motherfucking water.
Oh my God.
Imagine.
But what the monolith means to me in that film is the film is the monolith.
Ooh.
So 2001 is the monolith to us as the viewer.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the message that it means to those that encounter it in the film is exactly the same thing that you just touched on. You need to evolve some way. You need to raise the bar in a different direction. You need to try different paths. So as a filmmaker, you're trying to say, okay, let's try this instead. But if you look back on reviews and interviews of 2001 and its significance on other directors, you wouldn't have Star Wars without 2001 Space Odyssey.
For sure.
Right?
Even like when you're thinking about AI, like, you know, this isn't the same level, but wouldn't have Terminator without 2001.
Right. You wouldn't. These films of our past are important. And if they were a part of your childhood, great. If they weren't and they mean something to you now, even better. Because we're always evolving. We're always adapting. And if you don't, then you're stationary and you'll never grow.
That's profound right there.
Bam.
All right.
So before you do number one,
Yes.
should we do honorable mentions?
Ooh,
Just off the top of your head.
I love that you said that because I do have an honorable mention.
course you would.
And I was like, this could be my number 5. Actually, this could be my number 4. And what's funny is because there's so many movies you forget about, but I just watched this one the other day and it could be my top, it's definitely my top 10, but my honorable mention. And I guess it's kind of outside of the nostalgia realm because this movie's a little more recent. It's still, I think, like 2001, which is 19 years ago at this point, which is insane.
Wow. I actually didn't take time to think about that.
But so, yeah, honorable mention for me is David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Wow. That movie's like, I just love that movie so much. And maybe even more, maybe I like it so much too, is because I think around the second or third viewing, even without reading anything, I figured Mulholland Drive out. A lot of people still say the movie's like nonsense and it's like the non-linear things and nothing makes sense and there's no real plot. There is a real plot. Do you want me to? I don't want to go into it right now, but I figured Mulholland Drive out and I love that movie so much. For atmosphere alone, it's just amazing. It's just like a dreamscape and the weird sounds and the out of the focus pulls and the weird distorted and the kind of surreal characters that kind of don't operate on any kind of normal plane of existence. They kind of exist in that, you know, that space that's just like right in the subconscious. I don't know. It's hard to explain Mulholland Drive, but yeah, I just love that movie. I just watched it the other day. It was amazing.
Great. Do you have any other honorable mentions? Just without even have to dig into them.
Okay. Back to the Future. That movie, that's the childhood. Like when you talk about the Goonies, it just makes me think of movies like Back to the Future. And then going even back further, I just watched this the other day on Disney Plus, Sword in the Stone.
Wow, that's a deep cut, actually.
Sword in the Stone. I had that on VHS. I had a lot of Disney on VHS growing up. And for some reason, the ones that hit me the most were, I loved Sword in the Stone. I loved like young King Arthur and the fact that he could, at the very end, he pulls that sword out. He doesn't even know the significance of it. He's just so pure of heart. Like, what a great story that is. Yeah. The Little Mermaid. I mean, when I'm thinking about my favorite Disney movies ever, like being a kid, I think I watched The Little Mermaid and The Sword in the Stone most. Okay. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I already touched on Psycho. That's definitely up there. I'll probably be remiss that I didn't include that in my list at some point, maybe. But
you did talk shit about the remake, though.
As of 2020, January 2020, Psycho did not make it into my top 5, but the 1960 Psycho is fantastic.
What more can you say?
We don't need to. It's Psycho.
It's to me Hitchcock's best film, and it's almost a perfect film. when I think about it, I mean, the acting, some of the acting is a little hammy, but that's just of the time. Like the detective.
Yeah.
That kinda,
Arbogast?
Yeah. He's just, he's just, William H. Macy. Actually, that's one of the best parts about the remake is William H. Macy as Arbogast.
I've already mentioned that I like big monster movies. Tremors is up there for childhood nostalgia. Not a great movie, not a good movie, but it's something for me. When I was younger, going back to the video store discussion, if it wasn't for having larger than life posters and a horror movie section that made me suspicious to even walk through the threshold of, if you didn't have covers like Tremors, you wouldn't have my interest and a child's curiosity of like, that looks pretty scary. I actually kind of want to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
It's that lure of wanting to be scared, but seeing something so inhuman and unrealistic.
Yeah.
That just lures you in. Like, I love that. Another childhood honorable mention. I cannot say that I cannot complete a Christmas season without watching it, but I actually cannot complete a year without watching it. At least once is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
I almost, for some reason, I thought you were going to say Home Alone, but yes, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. He's like one of the most good-intentioned characters of all time. Like he's a dad joke personified.
Hell
like
yeah.
He's just so chipper, and he wants the best for his family, but he's just kind of a goofball, and he's kind of a fuck up, but you love him.
He's lovable.
Clark Griswold.
Yeah. Okay. Number one.
All right, here we go. I kind of spoiled it. Because you mentioned Bernard Herrmann, and there was a little bit of a spoiler. So my number one. Now this goes back again to not my Blockbuster video days, but there was a point, a summer where I lived with my dad in Moncton, and I didn't know anybody. Like I had a job, but I was just like going to spend the summer in Moncton. And I kind of wandered around, and I went to the different video stores and Music World and the mall, and I would just buy movies and watch them. So this movie hit me at just such a perfect time of just like, I didn't know anybody. I was kind of lonely, wandering aimlessly. So my number one is a perfect storm of everything that is movie making. It's perfect director, perfect actor, perfect screenwriter, perfect score composer. And it's Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. It's always, I think, I'm trying to think if I've ever not thought of it as the greatest movie ever made, but I don't know, something about this movie. I mean, like I said, it spoke to me at a perfect time, but it's just, I'm such an interesting character study. And this goes back to what I was saying about Bad Lieutenant. I just love kind of force of nature movies where we get to follow just one character and we're almost, not exactly their POV, but we just follow them as they, we're propelled into action with them. Like we have no choice but to kind of walk alongside them. And Travis Bickle's one of the greatest anti-heroes characters of all time. Played by obviously one of the greatest actors ever, Robert De Niro. But again, this movie just plays into my love of grittiness. You got New York City, one of the greatest movie location cities ever committed to film. You got Robert De Niro, one of the greatest actors ever. You got Martin Scorsese, a director who at the time just really had, nothing to lose, but everything to prove for himself. I don't know, just a perfect storm of a movie, and a perfect movie. My favorite movie of all time, Taxi Driver.
Number one. Taxi Driver is a great one. My number one is not only regarded as one of the greatest films of all time, genre and all time, but it was also my gateway into film and being mystified by film. And I have it tattooed, just like I do on entries 2 and 3. And if you know me, it exists from my knee down on my left leg. It's Jaws.
Oh, Spielberg.
Well, it's not just Spielberg. It's Jaws. And I was 5, and my dad told me, you should watch Jaws. Highly regarded film. So we rented it. I remember watching that alone And I don't remember much of the film from that viewing, other than the last act of that film where they are fishing and, you've gone actually over half of the film before you see the shark head on. So the first emergence,
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
and then you see the shark come up through the surface. That's when my interest and my memory starts.
And for a non-human character, one of the greatest character entrances of all time.
Hell yeah. But I think this is also important. You'll run into people of different generations, maybe, and different appreciations of film, and with no offense to them, and they will say, well, that shark looks pretty fake. But all shark films look fake. Yeah. But how are we supposed to know? Because none of us are next to a shark that close.
I know. You're going to get a real shark to be in your movie?
Yeah. And are you going to make it look menacing like it is supposed to be Freddy? It is supposed to be Jason? Like this film, it used exactly what it needed to tell a very important story and to build tension. And it is a product of the shark not working in the water. So because the mechanics of the shark did not work in the frigid waters when they were filming, they just went ahead and they filmed other scenes. They filmed POV of the shark. And in combination of that happy accident with John Williams' score of, well, they say 2 notes, but let's be honest, it's 3 notes.
It's a little more than 2 notes.
Yeah. It's E and F, and then the boom at D. But in any case, that created so much more. That did for 70s monsters and horror and beyond what we were talking about with what does the last 20 minutes of 2001: A Space Odyssey really mean? Well, it doesn't need to mean too much more than here's the new standard of telling a movie. If you were to read film, you're looking at film through like a literary sense. Jaws is very simple. It's a very simple movie. It's a shark who's terrorizing a local, beach and area, and a very stressed out chief of police, and
that gross mayor that I hate.
Oh, come on. He was so great in that, though.
But he's such a terrible person. He's just like only thinking of the tourist dollars. He's not thinking of actual people.
That's right. Well, we will be open on the 4th of July.
yeah. And I guess I get it, but come on, man.
Yeah.
Jaws.
But I mean, it's just like you had said about Taxi Driver to you, Jaws is a perfect storm of its own storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's so simple and effective, and the absence of the shark to build tension for when you finally see it, the shark is not as shocking as the sequence that unfold. Everything makes sense. You're watching it, you're seeing them hunt it, and then when the shark, kind of counteracts and eats Quint, everything just starts making sense. Sure, the animatronics might have been different in 1970, especially in cold waters, but that's besides the point. It's framing, it's storytelling. That's what it is. A simple movie told beautifully and effectively. The movie still ranks highly on movies you must see of all time. So from a canon perspective, it is still very high. But for me, if it wasn't for Jaws, I wouldn't have been into watching film from a very close, submersive kind of perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, I love getting lost in a good film. And if you don't like Jaws, that's fine. But that feeling of when it's good, it's good. Mm-hmm. Like you can't beat a good movie. Mm-hmm. That feeling. Yeah. Anyway, Jaws is that to me to this day. If you started a line, I'm going to finish it for you. I've watched that hundreds of times. I know I've watched it 100 times. Not dozens, hundreds. I know I've watched it.
I think what's also amazing about Jaws, like you were saying, a perfect storm of, you have a great, obviously a great filmmaker, with at that point, a lot to prove. But it's interesting how, like, let's talk, talk about fate, talk about destiny, the movie gods, whatever you want to call it, the fact that the shark they wanted to have in the movie did not work, like, it's almost fate that it didn't work because it made it better. In a way, the suspense, when that buoy pops up, you know Jaws is there. You don't see him, but he's there. You know, it's amazing.
Well, it's the score.
And the score as well.
It's if you hear the score, you know it's there. Right? So, I mean, you could probably do multiple episodes. You could probably do a whole course on Jaws. But Jaws is my definitive best film all time. Childhood or not, Jaws is it.
Love it. That's a great film. Great pick.
Well, thanks for listening in. That was our discussion on our top 5 movies. Join us next week when we talk about our top 5 albums. Tell us what your favorite movies are. Matter of fact, tell us what your favorite albums are. Tell us your favorite nostalgic moments that take you back to you sitting in your very first theater experience. I'm Matt McGrath, saying, we're going to need a bigger boat.
And I'm Kyle Smith. Are you talking to me?